Hello, YouTube. I want to talk about my time at UPS a little bit more. I was a part time package handler, and there were a number of injuries that I witnessed or experienced personally. One of those injuries was I was on a second story slide sitting on the edge of it. These are bordered by metal edges that come up about 12 to 16 inches. And I was breaking a jam, and the packages came down and pushed me into this metal point that was welded to the side of the slide above me to function as a mount for safety railing that ran from that slide up to where the pickoff position was at, 3 stories above the ground. I had a hole punctured right up here between my eyes, and I ran to the office. I'm like, I got hurt. I feel like I'm gonna pass out. I felt like I was gonna faint or something. Like I started to feel really sick and lightheaded. And they didn't want to take me to the hospital or help me seek medical attention. The next day, they demanded I come back to work. I went and got checked out by the company doctor anyway. They didn't want to process it as a workplace injury because it was on the safety committee. And I wasn't given any compensation. They didn't want it to be reported as a dart injury. That was their only concern. They weren't worried about how I was doing or if I was going to have permanent scarring to my face. On another occasion, I was on PD1 in my work area. It was the outbound twilight shift. And I was on the floor on the base level on concrete. And an E-Reg train came by. These are orange trains. There's no safety chains or load retainers on these. Anybody who's worked at UPS knows what an E-Reg train is. It's a motorized cart that's electric with a whole bunch of train cars that are open on the sides behind it. And they run a circular route down the aisle that runs around the border of the building and between the rows of UPS trucks, the brown ones that you see delivering. Well, one of these E-Reg trains had something that was very similar to a truck axle on it, and it was carrying that as cargo. I was standing next to the supervisor's podium where we usually clocked in and clocked out. There were a lot of E-Regs on the floor. It was hard to walk or get around, and I was confined to a particular position next to a roller stand. And this E-Reg fell off. I didn't even have time to react or anything. It fell off on one end of the train on the side and just started to get dragged down the side of the aisle. And it stuck out and it pinned me against the roller stand. And I swear I thought that I was going to lose my leg. It pinned my leg and my foot against the base of the rollers where the caster's at, where the wheels are, closest to the aisle. And I'm like, man, this is it. I'm going to lose my leg, I'm going to lose my foot. And the train driver happened to look back and he stopped the train. I'm like, oh, thank God. And he came and he got the package off me. I'm like, man, you saved my leg, like for real. You saved my leg. I went to the emergency room. I got x-rays and I was freaked out because I thought that I was going to have some broken bones or something. And nothing changed. The company didn't change how they were operating. They didn't add any load retainers on the sides of the carts. They didn't give a shit about me. Packages were always falling off those E-Reg trains, and I was poor. I needed that job for insurance for my family and for my wife back when I was married, and they just didn't care about any of us. All they cared about was their safety record. If anybody got hurt, they would eventually threaten to terminate them. They would cancel their insurance, and they would get rid of them. If you got hurt bad enough that you couldn't work, they would just fire you. What ultimately led to me not working for the company anymore was I got really sick with respiratory illness, and there was always particulate circulating around inside the hub, cardboard particulate, because they would push unsafe amounts of volume through there. They would push unsafe production, and it would fall off of the belts from the second and third story while we were working. One of the engineers there, he was actually walking around over by PD5 on the automotive side where they work on the trucks, and a large parcel, a heavy package, fell from the third story and struck him in the head, and he had to go to the hospital and receive surgery. He suffered serious cranial injury, and they fired the supervisor in that work area, the part-time supervisor. His name was Lawrence. But it was just a horrifically unsafe work environment, and they treated all the workers as disposable. It was routine for there to be broken glass on the floor and these plastic ties that they would use to wrap the packages, which acted as snares that you'd trip over. The supervisors were supposed to pre-trip the work areas before anybody started working. They wouldn't do that. They'd just come in there to collect a check and do as little work as possible. Don't get me wrong, they would work hard at times. They weren't supposed to touch the packages under the union contract, but they did. And when somebody would call in, the supervisors would have to pick up the load and have other part-time workers take on increased workload that they shouldn't have been accountable for because of understaffing. But it was a place where people would come in the late spring and the summer, and it would get so hot in there that we'd have people fall out from dehydration and from overheating. And they'd have heat stroke, and the ambulance would have to come pick them up from the hub, take them to the hospital. And that was an issue that was recurring season over season. It would happen every year. And I just couldn't believe that any major Fortune 500 company would operate that way, but they did. And people were always getting hurt. I mean, it was constant, always a very dangerous workplace, unsafe work practices, because the way the company pushed unsafe production on people. People would get trapped inside of those outbound feeder trailers, the big 18-wheeler trailers. They'd get trapped in them because the packages would be getting pushed down 400, 500, 600 packages an hour, large boxes sometimes, and coupon boxes, and you'd have packages 7 or 8 feet deep around those rollers on some of those feeds, dropping down from the sort aisle and flowing to the pickoffs on these commercial rubberized belts, and finally coming down these metallic slides like what you see at the old playgrounds, but much bigger. And people would get hit by packages all the time. The packages would destroy your shoes. Your shoes would be getting hit so much by packages. You'd constantly be, every 3 to 6 months, you'd have to replace your work boots because they're getting the hell beat out of them with you working there, trying to just keep your feet from getting crushed or getting, something sharp jabbing into them. And no matter what I did, I would, tell them about the damaged equipment. I used to do plant inspections at the facility that I was at. Sometimes I'd have between 80 and 150 safety concerns that I noted. And they had a safety supervisor. The safety supervisor would mostly sit in the office and just receive my text messages. I had to sneak my phone in order to document things, and I'd take pictures and send locations for all these safety concerns to prove, hey, this is actually a problem. You really need to get this fixed. But they had to replace something like 50 industrial fans, and there were a whole lot of rollers that they had to replace because the trucks would pull off in such a hurry trying to keep up with production, keep their hours down because the company was pushing these people so hard. The rollers would be pulled into the trucks, and the trucks would pull off with these 500, 600, 700 pound, sets of equipment, heavy duty steel rollers with aluminum racks and plastic pins on each one. And they'd fall out onto the ground 6 or 7 feet above the parking lot. Sometimes the guys would still be in the trucks, and those racks, heavy enough to crush a man easily and kill him, would be falling out of the hub onto the parking lot because the trucks were leaving and they weren't doing their due diligence to make sure that the loads were clear of people and equipment. And it was just a madhouse the way that they operated. You wanted to get the hell out of the outbound loads as quick as you could because it was very high risk, probably the most dangerous position in the entire building, working there or working in the unload. Stuff would get busted open all the time. Sometimes we'd have buckets, 50, 60-pound buckets come down the slide. Stuff shaped like a bowling ball come flying down the slide and slam into the load that you're in. And you'd be like, damn, what the hell's going on? What are these people thinking? This stuff, some of these packages come down, big metal cylindrical objects, and you're just praying and hoping every day that something like that doesn't come down your chute and get thrown into your truck and hit you. I mean, I had it happen to me a number of times where stuff just flew into my truck like that, like a missile. And every day I just stayed there for the insurance for my family because we needed benefits. My wife was sick all the time, and we ended up losing all that anyway. I got sick real bad after she died. Got asthma, and the company fired me. Right after I got out of the hospital, they just fired me. I told them I can't work that position, and that's what they do. They just throw you away when you get hurt.